And now, Rachel, there's another guy out there named Jon Jones.
Right. Whose name was brought up a lot because we all thought that it was like a done deal. The winner of Ngannou Miocic was going to be facing Jon Jones. It was going to be the thing. I want to say that I'm pretty sure
Dana White said it repetitively.
Right, that it was Dana White who was saying it because Rachel, was kind of like, I'm not a risk taker. I'm like, let's build. Let's get you some other fights, Jon Jones. Dana White was like, I'm pretty sure that he said this was going to happen. And then Jon Jones himself has gone back and forth, and kind of seemed like he ended on, yeah, let's just do this. I'm going to face the title holder and just do this. Then we have this fight. Ngannou wins. And
all of a sudden,
it's like, now it's like a thing. I want to be like, Dana, what? You didn't know that Jon Jones was going to want,
even though
not
he's
his
consistently
standard
said that since last summer.
Rate of pay? Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. So let me just throw this out here.
All right.
I had to take a deep breath when all this happened. And what I try to see is I try to see things from other people's perspective. You would even maybe say sometimes I perspective take to my own detriment. But in this case, I think it's good. I looked at it from Jon Jones, and I saw some. I haven't kept up with everything Jon Jones has tweeted, posted, whatever. But I saw some of it, and I do get it. Like, Jon Jones is like, hey, I'm coming from light heavyweight to heavyweight, facing the heavyweight champ, who happens to be Francis Ngannou, that has just torn through and just knocked people. I mean, he's a force to be reckoned with, right? And he's like, yeah, why wouldn't I want more money? I feel, John feels, right? John's saying this, that I should get paid what I'm worth. And his opinion is that the UFC isn't quite doing that. And this is an ongoing storyline in the UFC, that maybe they're not paying fighters quite what they're worth, right? Now I go back and I heard Dana White, right? Who says, it's one thing to say, yeah, you want to fight this guy. And then you immediately follow it up with, but I got to have such and such amount of money. Dana White deals with fighters day in, day out, and that does happen. We've seen that happen. Like, some fighters are like, yeah, I'll fight him, but I gotta have $1 billion. And you're like, do you really want to fight this guy, or do you not want to fight him? So I'm sure that has happened often in the sport. And Dana White's saying, you can't say you want to fight a guy and then start talking about money, where the way he was viewing it is, Jon Jones doesn't really want to fight this guy because he's making an issue out of money now so that he can't fight him, and then he can use that as his excuse. Now, what surprises me is that I made up a story that Dana White and Jon Jones know each other a little bit better than I know either one of them. And so, I don't know. Are they not assuming the best about each other? Are these guys not perspective taking for one another?
So I think that, just to hit the perspective taking point, Rachel, it's good to perspective take. My thing is that as a recovering codependent person,
yes,
if I'm perspective taking too much for the other person, not me, for the other person, that's not good for me. So that's what I mean. It's great for you to perspective take both for Dana White and Jon Jones. Doing that, I think Jon Jones says that he's been told by the UFC, hey, you want to make more money, move up and weight. Mm-hmm. He says, fine, I want to do that. I want to fight this guy. And they're like, hold up, we're not. So right now, seems like they're negotiating on how much that move is worth. Dana White's job is to always make the biggest, best fights possible. And honestly, it's to make as much money as possible for the company. Yeah. And so that negotiation, we don't really have to deal with that a lot in the UFC world, right? The difference between the UFC and boxing is that Dana White makes fights, and boxing, all these fights are actually happening in the UFC and boxing. It's just about negotiations for fights, right? So we don't usually have...
It is, because boxing is always one-off. You're creating the event from scratch, every single time. So the UFC has these fights, and these guys have a contract. This is what you get paid for your fight. And
so within a year, you'll be reading about the same fight negotiations for, let's say, Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua. And UFC will already put on 100 great shows. So that's a big difference in the sports. Mm-hmm. in the UFC. We usually don't have to see this thing play out. I do think it's going to play out. I think eventually, I have to believe that Dana White, inarguably the greatest promoter in MMA history, is going to put together what is sure to be one of the biggest fights in MMA history. UFC superstar Jon Jones, longtime light heavyweight champion who never lost a fight there, really, right? He never really lost a fight there. Moving up to fight the scariest looking dude that has ever been on planet Earth.
Gosh. I
I don't know who wins.
Jon Jones on his Insta stories where he came, it was like Sunday morning or something.
Yeah, it was like 1 a.m.
So he was, it was after the fight, and he was looking down at his phone, and he was like, you might be afraid to face Francis Ngannou, but Jon Jones isn't afraid. He goes, so, basically saying, make up that story for yourself, but don't make it up about me because I'm a different kind of person than the average human being, And I got it, when I see Jon Jones, when I saw him in those stories, he's not somebody that looks scared to do this.
He's definitely not scared.
And it's crazy to me, that he wants to get in that cage and he wants to, get physical and just, it's so,
well, and he more than just wanting, I'll do the thing. He wants to win the fight. He's been training since last summer, bulking up. Last, he was, 250 all of a sudden. And he looks... I'm excited to see that Jon Jones. I think the rest of the world is. And then the great thing from the UFC perspective, Jon Jones is a really, really big star. Besides Conor, he's probably the biggest stars, at least page views wise, which means in reality and for pay-per-views probably too. But listen, the best thing about Jon Jones is how polarizing he is. He's a big star, but he's also polarizing. So you have half the people that love to cheer for Jon Jones and whom he does well. The other half the people, they want to see Jon Jones get wrecked. In this fight, you put him in with Francis, and those people are going to buy that pay-per-view. It's kind of like Conor these days.
Yeah.
Half of them want to see him win. Half of them want to see him lose. That's what sells pay-per-views.
Yeah. My last thing that I'd like to say about Jon Jones and Dana White is this. Rachel, this is a great opportunity for me to accept people exactly as they are. Let Jon Jones be Jon Jones. Let Dana White be Dana White. And they may not act in these type of situations as Rachel would. So Rachel, I wouldn't publicly hold my fight negotiations. I wouldn't jump the gun and make assumptions and make up stories about people publicly, posting it online. I don't often go and tweet something and then immediately delete it. These are not things, but I can't understand that human beings are so different.
Yeah.
And when you used a word for Jon Jones, he emotes. Jon Jones seems like an emotional, passionate person. And there's a lot of beauty in that. But that also means that when it comes to stuff like this, us, the whole public, gets to see and witness everything that he does. So I like this as an opportunity for me, and even for Dana. Dana is somebody who seems to be very genuine. This is why he's great at press conferences, because when you ask him a question, he just flat out answers it. He tells you stuff that other bigwigs like this, they don't say these things out loud. And I can really enjoy both of those, letting those people and removing my tendency or whatever it is in me that wants to immediately judge people. Criticize, be they shouldn't be doing that. This isn't the right way to do that. No, this is the way they're doing it. And they've been doing this for a while, and people have a right to learn and grow, so I'm sure over time some of that will change. So we can all say that Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic don't approach their fighting careers the same. You ask Stipe Miocic what he's going to do next, he's like, oh, I don't make fights. I got other people handle that.
Yeah,
and he won't throw it out there. Jon Jones is very much going to tell you.
Both of them all-time great fighters.
Yeah, this is how I feel about it. And, he's a feelings kind of dude. And I feel like his feelings...
I identify a lot with Jon Jones because of the way I'm a feelings person. So
right, you could probably, identify with Jon Jones. I identify more with Stipe Miocic.
Today I don't get into near the trouble that I used to get into on Twitter. Yeah. But if you go back 5 years ago, I was tweeting all sorts of mess, right? And posting stuff on social media because I had a lot of feelings, and that's how I expressed myself.
Yeah.
And it wasn't I'm not saying what Jon is doing is wrong, but for me, I know what I was doing wasn't great for my life or whatever. But I had to learn that. It took a long time.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Well, I'm on 42 years old now. I've become quite wise.
Yes, you have become quite wise.